Hey everyone, Aussie Footy Chats here, episode 11, Geelong Trade Chats. So I'm going to talk about the Geelong Football Club today, who they traded, who they brought in, free agency, and their picks. So the Geelong Football Club had a really good year this year. They finished second, they won the grand final, and they lost to the Brisbane Lions. It was a drawn game at half time, the first one in a long time to be drawn at half time. Tough contest, hard at it, a really good grand final. Unfortunately, after half time, the Geelong Football Club sort of fell away and the Brisbane Lions ran away with it and won the game by a fair bit. And it's interesting because the Geelong Football Club had a reasonably easy draw going into the back end of the season. For a side that finished in the top four last year, they had a reasonably easy draw. And they should have had fresh legs. And it was interesting because they beat Brisbane earlier in the finals series. And they got a prelim and went into the grand final. So, that being said, I thought Geelong would have had fresh legs coming in the grand final. And Brisbane outran them, outperformed them on the big dance. So, it was a good year by them. But it was sort of, I guess, eye-opening for the list to get there and unfortunately not make it through to win the grand final. So that sort of sums up their season. It still was a really good season. They won a lot of games. Last year they brought over Bailey Smith through the trade period from the Bulldogs and was one of their best players this year, moving from the wing into the midfield in a full-time role. He did quite well. And so this year, their trade period was interesting. So we'll talk about who they sort of went for. So they first sort of tried to go for Charlie Curnow, with him being on the market with the Blues opening the trade in him. So the Cats offered up 3 first-round draft selections for Charlie Curnow, but it wasn't enough to entice the Blues to trade their star player. So they went with Sydney's first round picks plus Will Hayward. So that was a better deal than what Geelong were offering. Now there are reports that Carlton were asking for Myers as part of the deal with the 3 picks. So Carlton really wanted to get 3 picks and a decent player. And after this season, Sydney's first round draft pick is better than Geelong's because Geelong obviously finished in the top 2 and it devalues their pick compared to Sydney's pick this year, which they didn't play finals, so it's a lot higher first round pick. So that's quite interesting when you actually think about the deals behind the doors, closed doors. So They didn't quite snag him. So it was interesting because I don't think Geelong actually need a forward line player. They need a ruckman. So they've got Neil and Jeremy Cameron. Obviously Jeremy Cameron's getting older. He had the broken arm during the grand final, but he'll be back, and I still think his season this year he was on total fire, basically kicking goals and bags. I mean, there was talks of him maybe chasing down 100 goals for the season. And that's, he was the Coleman medalist and he kicked a bag of goals. Didn't quite get to the 100 and we all wanted to see it. Everyone hasn't seen that since basically Buddy's done it. So that was a long time ago. I think 2008. So that sort of explains how long since someone's kicked 100 goals. So he was, with Geelong having the easier run home, you could see that a lot of people thought he was going to kick 100 goals. So they thought that they would look for a key forward. And Curnow obviously is a star talent. And they definitely were looking to get that in. But I feel like their forward line's generally very good and probably didn't actually need to add Curnow into it. So they obviously didn't make the deal with Sydney, and their deal went down to the last day. And I'm sure Geelong tried to sort of chase him down too, but as I mentioned before, they needed a ruckman. With Reece Stanley getting older and one of the developing ruckmans just not quite hitting his straps as the club would like. They're sort of struggling, and they have for a few years with the ruck spot. They sort of struggle and they can play an undersized ruck, and it doesn't quite suit their lineup having no ruckman. With their midfield, they've got they generally have everything. They've got a good defense, a couple of young guys that are really good, with a couple of good backmen, and also their forward line with Jeremy Cameron and stuff like that. They look really good, and to get a key ruckman that is really good into their side would have been ideal. I know their list management probably think that, so I'm going to explain who they tried to get. So Rowan Marshall is St Kilda ruckman, with Tom DeConing coming into their lineup. It's going to be hard for those two to work together. It'll be interesting to see, and I'll talk about that with St Kilda. But with him coming into the lineup, Geelong tried to offer a deal to St Kilda, which was offering pick 19 and a future second round pick, but were unable to strike a deal with the Saints. So they couldn't strike a deal. They had offered up their first round sort of pick and a second round pick, which, he's older. He's in his early 30s. I think they probably wanted a bit of a higher first round pick. He is contracted, so Geelong would have had to offer up a better deal to get him out of St Kilda, and St Kilda obviously stuck to holding his contract and kept him because they looked at that deal and thought it wasn't quite up to their standard, and they denied it. So that's left Geelong without a key ruckman in the trade period. And that's like the missing key to their team, unless they can develop one of their young ruckmans on their list or pick up a VFL or SANFL waffle player or in the state leagues. They can somehow do that, which been a very good run of being able to grab players like that. But ruckmen are very hard. They take a while to develop, and they just, big guys like that just don't grow on trees. So they struggled with the ruck department, and Stanley's getting older and with the injuries. So they went pretty hard for Marshall and tried to get that deal done, but unfortunately fell through. And so with free agency, they brought in James Warple, who significantly boost their midfield, and they got a lot of inside mids. So Tom Atkins is one of the inside mids, plays more of a tagging type role. They have Dangerfield run through there every now and again. He plays obviously half forward. Really only goes in the middle when they need him. And Bailey Smith, which they got last year from the Bulldogs, they sort of didn't really need more running type players in their lineup. And with Mitch Duncan sort of retiring, Cam Guthrie retiring, they've elected to bring James Warple in from Hawthorn as their free agent pickup, which cost them nothing in the end, so they got him for free. So it's quite interesting. They've brought him into the team. He's from that area, so he's a local boy, and there was talks of this year that he was going there, so it eventuated. He's now at the Geelong Football Club, and they sort of got another inside mid that can sort of help out Max Holmes and Bailey Smith. So that's their running midfielders. Max can play off the half back, but yeah, he's starting to move into midfield now and develop into a good running midfielder. Albeit him and Bailey sort of play a bit of both. They can play inside and on the outside. But yeah, their strengths really, like as Bailey Smith's come off the wing playing at the Bulldogs, now into a full-time midfielder. He's added both those sort of roles to him and can be an inside and an outside runner. So both those players have excellent running speed. So with Duncan and Guthrie retiring, they do have an inside mid role that they need to fill in. So Mitch Duncan, he could play sort of half back and in the mid. So yeah, that's quite interesting. They also, I feel like they need another extra running midfielder, simply because they were outran in the grand final, and I sort of sat down and had a thought about that. They just didn't work as hard as the Brisbane Football Club, and they ran off their feet. They kicked, multiple goals in the third quarter, and another set of multiple goals in the last, and they took off. They won by a fair bit. And Geelong have an older list. You look at Dangerfield, like, can he play any more time in the midfield this year? Had a hamstring injury during the season. So how they balance that is probably by playing him up the forward line. And he plays that role quite well. And you could see when they brought him into the midfield how much he lifts that midfield up. But at his age and with his body, it's probably not the best thing for him to be able to, to be doing that. And they're going to need to change that up. And so they've brought in Warple. So the one player they did trade out, I'll just get into my notes and read those. So in a trade twist that no one saw coming, the Cats also struck a deal with Richmond that saw an untried midfielder, Patrick Rashenko, be traded to the Richmond Football Club in exchange for pick 99. So Geelong got pick 99 for him. So, essentially, they traded him off pick 99. Richmond must have seen something that they liked in him and thought, obviously Geelong's a hard team to break into because they're a star team. They played in the grand final. They don't really have much change in their lineup unless it's injuries. So they brought in Warple, traded out one player. I'll just quickly talk about who they delisted as well. So they delisted Ted Closey. So his brother plays at Gold Coast, and there's talk of him maybe going there. We'll get into that with Gold Coast. He played a few games this year. He looked okay. He was in and out the side, and they've delisted him. Mitch Duncan's retired. Cam Guthrie's been delisted. An inside mid can play half back on the big sort of half forwards. But your big inside mid that could great tackler and his body is let him down. He missed a lot of football this year due to injuries, and unfortunately the club has parted ways with him, which is probably one of the big delistings of the end of season. And they've had a couple more players, Ivazican and Matafoy Forbes and George Stevens. So George Stevens played a few games this year. I thought he looked pretty good, personally, and it was quite interesting they've delisted him, maybe to make room on their list for a player that they feel like they're going to get in this draft, which could be interesting. They could get a young ruckman and develop him for the next year or two while they sort of manage to try to pick one up in between. Do they pick up one in the state leagues? So a couple of players that are untried, being delisted or were traded. George Stevens, traded. I would be surprised if he doesn't find a new home in a club. Especially clubs like, North Melbourne, Melbourne, and clubs that have struggled. So, like even West Coast, for example. There's no reason why that guy shouldn't find a home. He looked pretty settled in the team. And really it was only just dropped due to other players come back from injury that just may have been in front of him. And like I said, it's a hard team to break into. So I'll just quickly talk about what picks they have in the draft. So the Cats held all of their future draft pick selections for 2026 and 2027, meaning they've traded no draft picks out of those years. And in this draft, in the 2025 draft, they're left with pick 19, pick 40, pick 60, pick 78, pick 96, 99, and 114. So really, very late sort of picks in all categories. Pick 40 is a reasonably late second round pick, and it just on from there. So all their picks are quite late, and they'll sort of be scrounging around to pick what they can get in the draft. And Geelong have got a really good history of being able to grab players and develop them and fast track development and turn them into really good players. So they've got a really good history of that. They've got a history of obviously trading other players in and making them better players too. But this season they didn't quite do that. Tried to get Rowan Marshall. Really went hard for Charlie Curnow, which I thought was a strange one because they didn't quite need a key forward at this time. I get if they want to replace Charlie Curnow in the future. But ideally, I don't think that it's really one that they needed. And they sort of put their eggs in one basket, then sort of tried to go over and do the Rowan Marshall deal. And St Kilda could have just been sitting there watching and seeing what they offered up for Curnow, and then thought they could probably get a little bit more for Rowan Marshall because they were given so much up in their draft capital. So I think this Geelong Football Club should have maybe changed their tune a bit and went for Marshall first before offering up their picks. I mean, they were just, that's what they wanted to do. They didn't want to offer up a player. I think Geelong would have been happy giving up 3 first round draft picks but no players for Curnow. So the Carlton have gone ahead and done the deal with Sydney instead, which got them a player. That really does cover Geelong. I'll be interested to see where they go this season. I expect them to still be really good. And they would have been even better with Ruckman given their midfielders' first use of the ball from the ruck. And a key position player that can run around the ground and be a defensive back with the marking. It would have just strengthened their defense even more. Just would have been the key to everything that they needed. So that's my review on the Geelong Football Club with their trade period. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I have a new mic now. I've got a few more added photos in my set, and I've essentially got this set up now. I'm going to have a guest on soon, so we're getting all this sorted out. I wanted to have my set all ready to go. And I've hope you enjoyed this episode, especially Geelong fans. I've covered it pretty fairly, and just a chat about that, and I'll be on to the next football club. And I hope everyone has a great Sunday. Enjoy the rest of the week. Stay safe, and thank you.